Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Darke, your host, and with me is my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. And today we get to talk about the Season 8, just all of it. All of the great people that we had in Season 8. This is the post-match show. And, last post-match show, we had a World Cup review. We don't quite have a World Cup review this time, but what I'd like to do is a little bit of a summer preview to see what's the Jobson House have in store. What are you guys going to be doing before we get into these amazing interviews? And I do say amazing. I don't say that lightly. These were some amazing interviews that we were able to do this season. I absolutely loved them. So, but before we get into those, what do you guys got going on this summer?
Well, Phil, hopefully people have already listened to those interviews and they can agree. But if not, I know they'll go back and listen to them because it really was a great season of interviews. But it's hard to believe summer's almost here. We're a few weeks away from school getting out. We're celebrating a 14-year-old birthday this week. So that's new for us. Our oldest is 14, so that's kind of wild. Which changes dynamics of summer plans, et cetera, as you know. Nothing crazy, but entertaining a 14-year-old is a little different than entertaining a 6-year-old. So, but we do some summer travel, and also we've got a group of 32 that are going to Guatemala with us with Warrior Way Gives. So we're excited about that trip coming up. A lot of planning involved, obviously, and but some awesome stuff going on through that partnership down in Guatemala, through the villages and areas down out of Antigua. So we've started a soccer tournament down there. This will be our second tournament that we're doing with the villages just outside of Antigua. We bring in these young kids out of their villages. They get uniforms and cleats, and we compete and have just a festival of a day around the game of faith and soccer. So our teammates partner up with their teammates and coaches and just really pour in. So I will do that and then visit some villages while we're there as well and go back to their homes and talk to them and their parents. So excited about that, along with just vacation, man, just getting out of school and try not to plan too much, right? I mean, some of the fun of summer is just kind of going with the flow when you can. I don't know how you guys navigate that, but something we enjoy is the non-scheduling of summertime.
Yeah, I mean, you got to use that pool too, right? I mean, I have no doubt that'll get a lot of use this summer.
It's Texas. We're already in that thing. It's year round.
I know. That's true.
What do you guys got
without
going
school? Actually, talk about birthdays. My middle child, she turns 18 on her graduation day. So May 25th will be a big day for her. She's kind of like torn. It's kind of like the Christmas birthday. She's like, I feel like I'm gonna, kind of get ripped off because I won't get a birthday. I'm like, the entire school is celebrating your birthday. What are you talking about?
Yeah, totally.
It's incredible. So you get to have a huge party at the sober grad night. So it's exciting. She turns 18, big birthday on that graduation day. And then we got our family camp that we get to go to every year. That's at Mount Hermon, amazing place that we get to go, and just such a sweet time to be able to connect with each other. A lot of times, as you might imagine, at family camp, we don't see each other, which is ironic. But they're doing their thing, we're doing our thing. But just amazing teaching that we get to do, eat all our meals together, be able to just, have a blast in an amazingly beautiful. If you've ever been to Mount Hermon, those people who are listening who have, just redwoods, and there's creeks, and you got the Santa Cruz close by, and just an amazing, incredible place that we're very blessed to be able to do that. And obviously we're gonna have some soccer, we're gonna have some summer camps going on, but at the most part, we're just gonna hopefully be able to get some good family time. We're talking about maybe doing, my oldest is working at a summer camp down near Flagstaff, Arizona, and so we might do a little road trip and see Sedona and the Grand Canyon and see her at the camp there in Flagstaff. So we'll see. It's a Young Life camp, so it should be pretty cool for her to be able to do that. I'm excited to get my son back. He's going to be taking his summer. Glad he's going to be spending it at home, taking after his first year at Biola. So we'll have the first time ever in the Dark House this summer. There will be more males than females, more boys than girls in the Dark House for the first time ever. So I talked to my youngest about that. I'm like, you excited about that? He's like, yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We're taking over
Yeah, that's
the
a normal
home.
thing,
So
and
yeah,
it's a normal thing in
exactly.
our household. So
We're gonna get a taste of the Jobson craziness, except we still have a girl here, so that's something that's a little different. But it's
yeah,
gonna be good. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
good.
No doubt, we're gonna play a lot of sports and do some pickleball and soccer and football and all that good stuff. So I'm excited
Awesome.
for it to come down the pike. So I'm also excited as we get to take a little troll. That was kind of the future. Now we're going into the past, and to be able to
Yeah.
take a little stroll down that lane of all the cool people, the great people we were able to connect with over the course of this season. The first half, we already talked about those ones, but if you can go back and listen to the halftime show to be able to hear about the great interviews we had at the start of this. But we've had some legends of the game, pro, college, people that have worked at every level of the game this season. It's been pretty amazing, and this half is no exception to that. So we kicked it off with Becky Burley, and we were able to talk with Amanda Vandervoort, go to Keith Tozer, as we talk, Hall of Famers, and then Andrew Simpson doing some really cool stuff on the mindset and performance coaching side of things. So let's kick it off with Becky. I mean, just generally, first of all, would you just I don't know. I really enjoyed this season, probably as much, if not more, than any other one. And maybe just because we're getting more comfortable talking about some deeper things. Maybe because you and I are just able to bounce off each other more too. I don't know. But what would you think of this season?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned it, some legends, honestly, of the game and some different areas and aspects of soccer that were just, I mean, fun to talk with, fun to hear stories and fun to just to continuously learn from others that have been in the game, in some similar respects and different. I mean, we talk, in the Becky Burley interview of some of our overlap through college soccer, and she's a legend of the game and what she's doing now, now that she's not coaching and giving back. I think that as a coach, I think that's what you kind of hope happens, that when your coaching days are over, if they ever are, then what are the other ways that you're giving back to the game? And I think that Becky was always a giver, even through her coaching career. But fun to talk to her. And of course, I grew up in Atlanta with Keith Tozier being the coach of the indoor team in Atlanta, so being able to talk with him and was a cool situation. And then Amanda, I mean, she's done some really amazing things. I mean, she was president of United Soccer Coaches at one point, and now running, I think, president of USL. So just some really cool aspects of the game that I know I don't always have the opportunity to talk to folks doing things in those different arenas, but to be able to give that to our listeners, even, I think was really cool. So pretty special season on those fronts for sure.
Yeah, I talk to people about that all the time. I'm like, how many times have you had a conversation with someone and you're like, man, I wish that other people could hear this conversation.
Yeah.
And we get to do
That's
that.
what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what we're
exactly.
doing.
We get to have those conversations, and people do get to hear them. And some of those conversations, sometimes I do the pre-interview, and I'm like, shoot, I wish I would have had to just push record and gone, But I feel like all of these conversations brought out some of those things that those pre-interviews do, And so,
Yeah.
so let's just, start with Becky, and just, that was the other thing you talked about. You hit on it. Like, you've coached with three of the coaches that we had on this season. You've coached against, right? We had Keely Hagan at Colorado State now, but she was at University of Texas, as well as Carrie Sanchez, who was at University of Texas. Now she's at Colorado College. And then Becky, right? So, and being able to play against Becky, apparently, I think you may have had some closer games, it sounds like, against the Texas coaches than you did against Florida. But that was something that just brought out a different aspect of, because you've seen them in their element in the regards to coaching as well, to know that they're the real deal. Like, they're not just talking about platitudes and saying things that sound good here, but we had to have that personal friendship and relationship with these people as well, which was really cool. But with Becky in particular, We talked about the stuff she's doing now to serve. I mean, What Drives Winning is doing some amazing things. If you haven't listened to that interview, go back and listen to it. If you haven't listened to these interviews, go back and listen to them before you listen to Paul and I just talking about them, because it's way better to just hear what these people had to say. But we do like to go back and just touch on some things that really stuck out to us. I know with Becky personally, I just loved researching for that interview, because I got to go back to all those What Drives Winning videos and just watch a bunch of them and see the cool stuff they're doing. But also just hearing her take on some of those things. And one of the things that she talked about that I've used since then a lot, is that idea of that weak mind. Is it weak mind? I forget.
Weak voice, strong voice.
Weak voice, strong voice. Yes, weak voice, strong voice, which sometimes starts in the mind, right? So maybe sometimes it is that
totally.
that weak mind, strong mind, right? So, but that weak voice, strong voice that she talked about, and obviously that was Sue Enquist at UCLA that came up with that. But just hearing her talk about that. The idea of struggle is a biological requirement for greatness. That was a quote that we talked about there as far as resilience and adversity. But what really stuck out to you in that interview, and just what do you want to bring out?
I think one thing that stands out, when you have an opportunity to pick the brain of somebody I'd consider to be a legendary soccer coach. She started the program at Florida and had a great career and is very well respected in the soccer community, not just on the women's side, but on the men's side. What you don't get sometimes is you don't get an opportunity when people get out of coaching to see what they're continuing to do. And I think what she's doing with What Drives Winning, you really get to not only hear her voice, but obviously there's a lot of people kind of involved in that, Brett Ledbetter, whatever, but how she's continuing to push the game and give back to the game. And I think you just hear that throughout the interview, just her passion for other people, which I think is one thing that made her a very successful coach, was her passion for other people and her continuous drive to continue to learn about people and about herself and about the game. We talk about DISC, which, if you listen to this podcast, we talk a lot about DISC, but she's a big believer in that too. But continuously learning about herself, continuously learning about others, and continuing to educate people along the way. And that's something I just really highly valued out of that interview that I gathered about Becky.
Yeah, and the other thing that she talked about that I don't want to ignore is, she talked about the importance of finding a thinking partner. We talk a lot about mentorship on this show, and I always talk to people about the example that Paul in Scripture talked about, right? The idea of having a mentee, that you're pouring into, to have a mentor that is pouring into you, but also have that kind of Barnabas, that person that he had that walked alongside, that is someone who you can bounce ideas off of, who is a peer, who is someone who's probably at this similar, typically with a mentor, it's someone who's about 10 to 15 years ahead of you. Or not always years, but just it doesn't have to be they're older, but just in whatever you're doing, maybe they're 10 to 15 years ahead of you, so they can speak into that. I know my wife and I just recently got a couple to mentor us in our marriage. We talked about it. It's like we have a really good marriage. We want to have a great marriage. We want to have a marriage that is just off the charts, and not so everyone can talk about it and say, oh, you guys are amazing, but for us to be able to experience that and to have that thinking partner to be able to say, hey, you know what, I think we're doing pretty well right now. I feel like, as a coach, you're like, I'm in a good spot. You can be in a better spot, right? And that's where someone who can walk alongside you, who will tell you the truth. And typically it's not an assistant. It's not someone on your staff. Typically it's someone outside of that who can have that third person just be able to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's some of the things that I really, think you could take it to the next level if you do X, Y, Z. I saw you do this. Here might be some blind spots. We talk a lot in DISC about blind spots. That thinking partner can help you with the blind spots and be able to walk along. Again, just walk with you. We obviously have our spouses, and hopefully they are they are the top thinking partner you have. But, oftentimes they're not even seeing some of those blind spots. Sometimes you have blind spots together. And in the coaching realm, oftentimes you're not coaching with your spouse, so they don't see that side of it either. So anyway, that's something that I really liked, and I probably took it a little further than she did there, but I don't know. What do you think of that, Paul?
Yeah, no, we talk a lot about that, and I think being a coach, you kind of fall into a mentorship role kind of automatically with your players sometimes. But I do think it's important that as coaches, we find others that can mentor us. Once you think you know it all, you're kind of done. So it helps drive the learning process. And I think another piece of that too, something that she talked about that I found interesting was the two questions she asks herself every year.
Mm-hmm.
I think just having some, it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like goal setting. It's kind of some reminders and things like that. I think that go along with growing yourself and pushing yourself alongside having a mentor or being able to mentee. I think that having some guidelines for yourself, some goals and objectives are things that can be helpful also. And I think she talks a little bit about her. I think you kind of pried it out of her to talk about her two questions that she was asking herself. So that's worth a listen as well.
Yep. I guess you're trying to avoid that a little bit, but that's all right. I don't do that often, but I really I did. I was curious.
Yeah,
Sometimes
it
when I
was
get
good.
curious, I go. So yeah, I think go back, listen to that episode. Also check out the What Drives Winning stuff. It is really
It's good stuff. Yeah.
And I know I've used it in the coaching stuff that I'm doing, not just personal coaching, but when I'm coaching others as well. Some of those videos, some of those different things, they're very easy. You can just plug and play, literally just have your team watch them and, or have your coaches watch them to be able to pull out those things. So
even outside of the things that we talked about with her, I thought what was interesting is how she and Ledbetter got together in that initiative as well. So that outside of soccer, but just we talk about relationships and networking and whatever, how that came together was a really interesting thing also. And that's worth a listen. So I thought I'd catch that before we move on to Amanda, because I think that's worth the story also to go back and listen to. So
we won't ruin the story. We
No.
won't spoil it. Go back, listen to
it.
it. Definitely worth a listen because it's got some great lessons in there as well that we've talked about on this show. That idea of take the meeting, the idea of don't say no for someone else, like all these other things. They all came into that story. So definitely check that out. All right, so let's move on to Amanda Vandervoort. An interview that, as we talked about on that show, I've been trying to do for about a little over a year. I'm glad we did it now because I think some of the USL Super League stuff they're doing, we were able to talk about that. I think some of the other things that came out in that interview that probably wouldn't have the time before, but it's kind of fun as we've talked about. That's one of those that you never know where you're going to meet someone. You never know what it's going to be. We met on Clubhouse as we've, like several of the guests probably have come off of that month or whatever it was on Clubhouse, and some of the really fun ones. And I know that this was a great conversation. I thought some of the stuff that came out, we did not plan on it coming out, but I thought it was some really important, really, really good stuff. But I want to hear from you first, and then I'll throw in my 2 cents.
Well, I think anytime you find someone who is, what I would call, successful in the eyes of the world, she's got a high ranking position at a really great organization, you wonder where they start from. And I think her story of what motivated her, what initiated her drive is worth a listen all by itself. That's the only thing you go back and listen to. I think just her story of what kind of drove her to be who she is and what she's about, I think is always, for me, that's always some of the most interesting piece of someone's life is what initiated, who they are and what they believe and why they believe it and why they do what they do and how they do what they do. What motivates them, what are the stories they look back on to say, well, this is who I am and this is why I am who I am. And I think she's got a great backstory. And I think, on the other side of it too, I think the fact that she loves to bake cakes, come on, does it get any better than that? They're just great in the kitchen. So that creativity has always been impressive to me. I can follow instructions, but baking a cake and making it cool, everybody wants to eat it is pretty impressive. But I do think where people come from, what makes them tick, those are things that interest me. And I think she's got an amazing story behind her.
Yeah, that was funny that when I saw that, her idea of championship cakes, I thought was interesting. We'll see if that catches on. I don't know if it will, but we'll see. We'll see. The other thing that I mean, the story I loved, again, I don't want to spoil it. I want you to go back and hear it from Amanda, but just the idea when she wanted to play soccer as a kid and she wanted to go to a camp and didn't have money, and that didn't stop her. She ended up being able to go to the camp, but how she got there, the initiative that she showed was just super, super cool. I thought, and that's something that I talk to my kids about already. My daughter, I'd mentioned, she's graduating from high school, and she's going to go to Youth with a Mission, and she's going to follow in her big sister's footsteps and heading over to Youth with a Mission in the fall. And that takes putting yourself out there and asking other people to help you get there, and not just begging for money. No, it's to say we want a team. We want to have people that can walk alongside us. We want to have people that believe in what God's doing through us. And so for her to be able to say, you know what, I'm gonna ask people, I'm gonna sell stuff, I'm gonna do things. It was super, super cool. I mean, like as a 13-year-old, it was crazy, just like all on her own, maybe her mom suggested, I don't know. But it seemed like she just said, knowing Amanda, she just said, I'm going to go after it and I'm going to make it happen, and it's going to happen. And she did. And so that was something that I thought was a really just good story for everybody to be able to just kind of grab onto and use in their life. So the idea of initiative, the idea of don't let a barrier just stop you. Don't let, there are ways to, if you want it bad enough and it's something that you have within your power to do and you have it within your skill set to do, you'll be able to do it if you just put your mind to it and think outside the box, get creative, right? That was something that I really liked in that interview. A couple other things, but I'll go back to you and see if you have anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you're spot on with that. I mean, we're kind of hitting on the same idea there with, kind of her backstory, what made her who she is. But we talked about, if I remember correctly, we talked about, the mental side of the game. We talked about some medical sides. I think we talked about the menstrual cycle and the women's game and how it can affect injuries, which I don't know that we've talked about that in previous episodes with anybody, but it's definitely a topic that, as we discuss in the show, needs to be discussed more, having been in the women's game for 17, 18 years as a coach. You see that and you read studies and you realize how much it does affect the game. So I love being able to talk about that, and her obviously her having played in the game and now being an executive at a high level, and talking about those things. We used to talk about those issues. They're not issues, but we're talking about those topics that are really important to the game. As it was fun to hear her insight on some of that as well.
Yeah, they're the realities, right? I mean, they are the realities that we often see as taboo, and that's not the only issue that we see as taboo. There's other issues that we see as taboo that are real, that actually, we, as she said in there, and I agree, we all need to be more comfortable with them. And as she said, there's women who are uncomfortable talking about the menstrual cycle. So it's not like, and I even made the mistake of saying that, like, oh yeah, we have a woman on our staff to be able to talk about it. She's like, well, there's women who are uncomfortable talking about it too. So we need to make it so it's we're talking about the facts, we're talking about the realities, and we're saying, hey, these are important. These are issues that if girls are getting hurt more when they're, at that certain time of the month, right? Then we need to know that, and we need to know when they're there, and we need to know and encourage them to be able to take the vitamins, supplements, whatever it is that will help with that they need to be able to do the things that will help them avoid those injuries, but also perform at their fullest, right? So it's not just avoiding the injuries. It's also to say if there's something there's a deficiency, if there's something that's going on, same way if you had a sprained ankle, you'd be like, okay, you got to do this. Here's how you get back, right? That's just a fact. We have no problem talking about a sprained ankle, but we have issues talking about some of these other conditions that may really affect them, So
yeah. Well, I would just encourage people just to realize there's still a lot of research out there on it as well. And there are a lot of people doing some great research, and just encourage folks to look into that piece of it as well, as to, hey, what else do we need to be doing to put the funding into some of these things that need to be researched so we understand it even better. I think that's a big piece of it. So that was an interesting topic. I think that she can shed some great light on. And but I thought she was just a great interview. So I thought one just overarching concept of that interview, it was probably one of the most just real conversational interviews we've really had. Very comfortable to talk to, and it really did. You mentioned it. We talked about some things we didn't plan on, I think, because it was just an absolute just conversation. And while we say we don't really script things, we do have some topics we like to talk to in case people can't talk with us. But Amanda had no problem conversing with the two of us over that conversation. So really, really loved that one.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I felt that the one we're going to talk about next was similar. I thought the
Yeah.
conversation with Keith Tozer was very similar to that, where it was
Yeah.
just flowed. But with Amanda, it did flow. I mean, we went from talking about the initial thing about her as a kid. Like she goes, "Can I talk about this?" It was like Rabbit Trail, Rabbit Trail, and then she
Yeah.
talked about Tai Chi, one of her teams that did Tai Chi, and then she talks
Yeah.
about again, I'm not going to go into that story. Talking about the menstrual cycles, talks about like all these different things. We're like, what the? Where is this going? This is great. I love it. But
Yeah.
that's what we love being able to, and they were all. I mean, great points out of all of them too. Great things to learn, great leadership lessons, great things that we need to know as coaches and as leaders in our different areas. But what were you going to
Yeah.
say?
No,
Just
I
agreeing.
was agreeing with you, and for sure on that one. I think I was going to mention championship cakes again because I guess maybe I'm hungry. I don't know.
That it is a little later out there in Waco, Texas, than it is here, but so it may be cake time there. But so yeah, let's go into that Keith Tozer. I mentioned it.
Yeah.
I love that interview. I mean, I didn't know a lot about Keith. I remember JP Dellacamera works with him with a major arena soccer league, and he JP's like, I think I can get Keith for you. I'm like, all right, great. That sounds good. I'd love to interview the commissioner, But I didn't know a lot about him. Doing that research for it was really cool. Finding out all those fun facts about the indoor soccer leagues and all those teams that have the crazy names, and about the first shirt sponsor. We're not going to say what it is. You got to go find out. The first shirt sponsor of a company sponsoring a shirt was in that MISL. He's the first pick in that draft, a Hall of Famer, like all these things. But when you get on a call with him, super down to earth, great guy, just being able to have a conversation with him, laughing about different things, learning stuff from him. As we've said before, man, I'm just like, I get giddy when we get to have some of these guys. I'm like a kid in a candy shop, being able to do what we get to do on these conversations, to learn from these people who have so much experience. And it's just a lot of fun. And I feel like these conversations were just a lot of fun. It's not a chore. There's no like, oh shoot, we got to do another interview. No, I'm like, I want to do more interviews. Let's do more interviews, And and that's how I felt with all these. And it was just such great conversations that I hope shines through. I hope the listener, I hope you listeners out there, I hope you're seeing this, that it's something. These are some special conversations that you can learn a ton from. And we laugh through them too. And so, but I love that with Keith, that sometimes you never know what you're going to get with some of these people who have these titles. But even if you go look at the picture that we picked for the cover art on the episode, it's just it's just him like giving a thumbs up, goofy little picture. But it's fun. So anyway, what'd you think? What were things that stuck out to you in that interview?
Well, I mentioned, I mean, I grew up, with him being the coach of the Atlanta Attack when I'd lived in Atlanta, and that was our indoor soccer team, and had some connections to that team as a kid, and being able to come back as an adult and have a conversation with him, and having really kind of watched his career too. I mean, I don't know if I'd call him a pioneer. I don't know if pioneer is the right word, but really has really pushed, I think, indoor soccer and futsal to where it is now in the United States, which a lot of people don't think it's very big, but it's bigger than you think it is. But it would be probably nowhere near where it is right now without Keith Tozer. I mean, the amount of work and the passion he has for soccer overall, but just indoor soccer and its benefits to the game, and futsal to the benefits of the game. He's really taken that niche and really driven it and pushed it as a lifelong passion, and has done just an amazing job with it over the years, and just has gained a ton of respect over his career in doing that. And I think some of the things that I really enjoyed about his conversation, and we talked a good bit about his transition from being a player to a player coach, and then to just being a coach. I think that transition and how he navigated that, and looking back on it now, years later, and what that was, what it might have been like in the moment and what it's like to look at it now, I found to be very, very interesting, because I just remember that league at the time had quite a few player coaches. I mean, as those leagues were developing and growing, you saw more and more, player coaches in their transition phases. So to hear what that really was like and what some of the struggles were, I found to be really, really insightful into just the game itself, and how we navigate it as coaches, and So I thought that was one thing. A bigger nugget I kind of pulled out of his conversation was that transition within his career.
Yeah, you said nugget again too. We
Yeah, I
we we
know.
al- we, we, we like to say nuggets on this show, and
We'll
it
go back
was.
and do a nugget count one day on our episodes. Can you clip like just have one? We'll have one thing in the summer where all you do is you just pull out all the word nuggets and it just flows
Nuggets.
like over the last 100 and whatever 20 something episodes.
I wonder if there's a way to search that. I wonder if there's a way to
Well,
search
I
that. We
mean,
probably,
can't the
yeah,
computer system just pull
I'm
out
sure it
certain
can.
words?
I know
Okay,
there's
all
a
right.
way to do it. I just don't know what it is. I mean, I am the producer, right? So I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah.
if I don't know how to do that, I don't know if I could probably outsource. Maybe I could go on Fiverr, see if someone on
Listen,
Fiverr can go
if we
do
can't
that.
do it
So,
now, in a month or two, there'll
yeah,
be AI that can absolutely do it for
yeah,
us.
it's
So
true.
we'll
I'm
we'll get that
sure.
out there. So
I have no
back to
doubt
Keith
it's
Tozier. I
there.
totally
I
I
just don't know.
totally
Yeah. So
derailed that
that's
conversation.
all
My
right.
bad.
That's all right. Sorry. No, that was my fault. I brought up nuggets. You said it, I guess. Maybe you brought it up. But the
Nugget?
things that
Yeah, nugget.
yeah, the things that he did, but in that episode that he talked about, just so many leadership. I was actually going to say nuggets, but leadership lessons in that episode that it's like a crash course. I mean, he does a lot of leadership coaching and development, but
Mm,
the geese, the
yeah.
why the geese formation is so important. Something Alex Ferguson talked about as well. Something a lot of people have talked about, but that's something that he went deeper than he had some parts of that I haven't heard before, and I really appreciated. Learned something about that. I didn't know that when a geese goes down and has an injury that only two of the formation go out and take care of the geese. I mean, you got that little pop quiz wrong in the episode. I'm not going to tell him what you said, but you got it. You
I
you
did.
you got it wrong, and I just waited for him to answer, or else I would have got it wrong too. But then I said it quickly after he said it, as if
Yeah,
I
you look
knew.
really smart in the
Yeah,
episode. You look
so
really smart.
I acted, but it's just a little trick, folks. I just gave it
Yeah.
I
I
just
learned a
outed
lot in
myself,
that
but that's
lesson.
okay.
Keep my mouth
But
closed.
but then also I loved him talking about leading up, right? I loved
Hmm.
how he, as a player coach saw different things. But then when he was the manager and he had that story, really cool story about how before a game he just brought all the senior leaders of the team, not seniors, but the veterans into the van with him and the coaches. They sat in the back and they said, "What would you do in this game if we weren't there?" And what happened out of that was super cool. I'm like, I want to do that with my team.
Hmm.
And just be like, hey, it doesn't mean we're going to do everything. As he said, it's not like you're doing it, but what would you do? And it turned out they did do all those things. And, I'm not going to let you know what happened because you're going to have to go listen to that. But super good lessons like that, that through that interview. As you said, I think also just hearing from him, a man who obviously has dedicated most of his life, most and pretty much all of his adult life to indoor soccer, to futsal, to developing those games, to developing not just the games, but to help other people understand how those games can develop the outdoor game too. That
Hmm.
was something that I thought was super important that all coaches, you need to listen to that interview just to hear all of those ways that he's talking about that it can be used, how you can train in those. And indoor soccer, as he said, if it hits the wall, it's basically going to be a kicking, because if you're playing that, don't count on that. Don't have that be a crutch. You can use it, but know how to play without using it, right? Like those are really things that I loved. I loved out of that.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that too about the futsal and indoor. And I think for those who don't fully understand the benefits or have, I encourage them to listen to it because I think what you may assume from hearing what we've said about Coach Tozier and his lifelong push for indoor soccer and futsal is that that's the way he thinks the game should be played, and that's absolutely not it. He sees it absolutely as a training function for the outdoor game, and so he sees it as a value add. But somebody who loves the big game, as we call it, and has a passion for the big game, but because of his great passion for the big game, he sees this piece of it as his passion and drive to develop the big game. Where some of us focus on the big game, we coach the big game, we play the big game, we focus on the big game. He's gone in and found this niche of something that says, man, if more people did this, this is how we could develop the big game better. And I would just encourage you to go back and listen to his expertise on that, because he gives a lot of great insight into that.
Yep. And, if nothing else, you'll learn some things that may come up in a trivia game somewhere at some bar that you're at a trivia game with some friends or a restaurant. You're doing trivia. There might be some MISL or MASL trivia that there's some names. If you want to know who the Hartford team name was in the MISL, you got it there. But, again, you're going to have to go listen. There's some funny names, too. And there's some funny little taglines that happened with those MISL teams that those were just little fun little things that we were able to add to that interview. So that was Keith Tozer. And I will say, just, even knowing, it brought back a lot of memories to me of the the MISL and the indoor and being a ball boy for California Surf. And again, they weren't part of the MISL, so I'm not sure what they were, but I know they played indoor at the Anaheim Convention Center. I can still remember doing that. So it just brought some cool memories back, and I know for you as well, as you talked about in Atlanta. So that was just fun there. All right, so this is going to be coming out, right? We're kicking off Mental Health Awareness Month right now as we're recording this on May 2nd. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. The last interview we had in this season was Andrew Simpson. He's a mindset performance coach. He talked about a lot of these issues, a lot of the mental health issues. I think one of the things he talked about is just the fact that, one of the misconceptions of mental health is it's not just one thing, right? It's not one thing. It's so many different things that go into it. And that was one of the things he talked about. He talked a lot of just about what some of the different things that our athletes, our kids, our players face and how we can overcome them. I mean, just generally. How we can create healthy mindsets and rebuild healthy mindsets in young athletes. But, a lot of the things in that interview that I thought were things we've, talked about on the show. Brad Miller came on twice. Love Brad. Absolutely love Brad. And I think some of the things that Andrew talked about were similar, but just a little different, which is cool to hear, like just different takes that might work. So maybe one of the ways that Brad talked about isn't really working with your players. So, okay, let's hear some of the things that Andrew is able to say about some of these things. And usually it's just something that it's adding on to each other. They're complementing each other in a lot of ways. And some of the things they're saying are the same. And it's the same kind of, nothing was in competition with it, which is what I appreciate and like. I think all these guys, no doubt, if we got them in the same room, they'd be like, hey, let's work together to figure out how we can crack this nut, because there are so many things going on, and it just seems like there's more and more and more and more things adding on to it with our world getting faster and faster and faster. You talked about earlier, AI, that's creating different things. I think AI, in one hand, will help in some ways. It's a good tool, but I think we'll also have our kids growing up now be thinking even less than they already have to, because you can just plug it in, get a paper written for you, right? That will, I think, lead to more mental health, because we're made and created to create. We're made and created to cultivate things in our world. So anyway, that went on beyond what Andrew talked about. But that was something that I just want to have more of these guys on to be able to give us different tools to be able to do. But anyway, what'd you think of Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of it. I thought that, the more mindset coaches we can have on, I think the better, because I see it a lot as kind of like coaches. You get a group of coaches together in a room and you start talking about different strategies and ideas and best ways to help your players, whether it's in the game or outside of the game or whatever. I think that these guys, the more that you can listen to, something may resonate with you for one of your players that maybe you didn't hear from someone else. So getting different ideas from different people, some things may not work for some people, some might work for others. I thought that, Andrew had a wide array of interactions with different levels of players, from the young youth player to the professional and everything in between, male, female. And, he shares some of his insights and some of the things that he sees that are going on in the minds of some of those different levels of players, things that are, may really impact a lot of our listeners that are coaching the high school, junior high school kids as well. He covers all areas, but I think he has some really good insights into some of those kids that on a daily basis are the impact of school and sport and home, that interaction, and how he at times has had to step into some of those situations with interactions with parents and whatnot. And I think he has some good insight into, and is very vulnerable about some of his initial interactions with some parents that maybe didn't go as well as maybe first thought. But I appreciate that vulnerability too. And then, some of the mindset hacks that he has, I think we talk about his book, and I encourage folks to go look into that as well. But the mindset hacks that he kind of goes through in the episode are, I don't know if mindset hacks are cool, but I do think that they can be very helpful. So he has some really good ideas of ways to process some of those things.
Yeah, and one of them he talked about take back control. Basically, the idea is take back control, right, of your identity was one of them. The other one he talks about is he had a couple female athletes, come home from college, and their coach was just railing into him and railing into him and railing into him. And one of the things he talked about was, you can control how you react to that, right? And it may be that you transfer, but it may also be that you just change your mindset toward that and don't let it impact you in the way that it has been impacting you. Don't let it take you down. Don't let it bring you down in that regard. And so it was just, he had a lot of different ways to look at things. And that's what I appreciated about it, was it wasn't run away from these issues. It was, it may be that that's ultimately what happens, but how can you, learn through and be a better person through that adversity? How do you build that resilience? And he's not excusing the behavior of these coaches either, and they're saying, oh, well, that's just what they do. It's like, of course, that's not healthy, but how we react to it can be. As we talked about, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to what happens to you. And I think sometimes we can't control what happens to us. If we drive too fast on a street, we can control not driving off a cliff. But that's there are. I just want to make sure.
I think the concept is once something has happened, you can no longer control what has happened, but you can control how you react to it. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next best thing? And moving in that direction. And you kind of mentioned his example of the kids coming back from college, and I've unintentionally found myself recently connecting with a lot of current college players who are kind of in that situation where they're looking to move on because of similar situations with their college coaches, and it's sad to hear it, but at the same time, knowing that there are resources out there for these folks to help navigate those challenges is really, really important that people know that they're not there by themselves, and that how one coach views them doesn't make them who they are. It doesn't make that's not their identity, but that how they choose to handle that, how they choose to move forward is really the most critical piece of all that. And I know, Brad, as we've talked about, and Andrew and some of the other folks that we've had on our podcast, I'd encourage, parents, if you've got some kids that are in those situations currently, or if there's some college players currently in that situation, go listen to some of those, or, reach out to me. I'm happy to help navigate some of that stuff. But it's, with the portal being as easy to get in and out of as it is now, and how quickly coaching changes are happening, you're seeing a lot of that right now. So you mentioned it with Andrew's thing, but I think just throwing that out there and connecting those dots of like there really is a lot of help out there, and it's not coddling or babying. It's like, hey, here's how we take these next steps to move forward.
Yeah. And the portal too. I mean, to get advice on the portal, because I think Don Williams puts stuff out there regularly. We had Don on early on about recruiting, but he puts out regularly about 52% of the people that go into the portal don't come out of it. Yeah. And that's a big number. That's a really big number. Now, that's not just soccer. That's all sports. But still, it's a lot of people are going in, and especially if you're going in this late, a lot of teams are already filled. A lot of teams have, so it's a big thing. That's not what we're talking about today, but that's something it's embroiled into the conversation. But he also has these fun things that I don't know if they're fun. I mean, as a parent, I didn't find it very fun, I guess. But he says, the common mistakes that 98% of parents make during their athlete's journey, right? And he talked about a couple of those. One is, pregame advice from a parent, usually isn't received very well. Post game criticism on the drive home, those things. When talking about just what we can do as parents and what we shouldn't do as parents. Talked about the comparison trap, right? The social media and comparison trap, and compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who somebody else is today. And I think that's very, very important, as we talked about many times on the show. Comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of contentment. I think that is something, that my daughter right now is in the process of having to find a new team. And it's a hard thing at 14 years old, because her team is now breaking up, which happens at that 14-year-old, especially with girls. A lot of those teams, they start breaking up around that time, various reasons. But it was something that, talking with her about that and saying, look, like, just go out and be yourself. Go out. It's almost like she's having to do all these different tryouts at the different trainings. And she's stressed out. She's like, I'm scared. I'm like, just remember, I actually brought an interview, little preview. The next interview we're going to have after this show talks about the identity issues. And I just said, who are you? You know who you are, and don't let other people's opinions of you, don't let other people's play affect how you play, affect how you act, affect who you are, because that's something that you're allowing all that other things to speak into that. And I think that's something that there's so many voices, so much noise right now speaking into our players, speaking into our lives, for that matter. So I think Andrew talks a lot about that in that interview too, just about how they can, overcome those traps, overcome the, I don't think we'll ever fully overcome, but how you can probably navigate is probably the better word for that. Anyway, what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And just kind of going back to what we said at the beginning of this, I wouldn't say that, I don't mean this in a bad way. Hear me out. I don't think Andrew's advice is the end all be all for everybody, but he is an option and has some great ideas. And so do Brad. And so does a lot of people that are out there. And I just encourage people to listen and read and take in information and process what's going to be best for them and their family. And, but there are definitely some things that are going on out there in the world through the game, through soccer, through sport, through school that, go back to mentors and mentees, surrounding yourself with people and information. That I think that's one thing that I love that we do at the end of every show is, what have you, read, watched, or listened to lately? I think that's just a life thing that we all should be doing, is reading, watching, and listening to things that can, challenge us and help us be better people in our homes and in our communities.
Yep. And we started the show talking about summer, and that's something I want to do this summer too, is just start reading some of these books. I might have a little bit of time. I don't know. Maybe I won't. But the books I do want to get through all the books that were recommended by our guests, and that's, I get through a lot of books every year. And, for asking the questions, I don't want to be this, oh, did you read any of those books? Oh, well, no, I thought they were cool, but, I just did that for other people, right? No, I want to be able to read through these, because if these are people that we respect enough to get on the show, then I want to respect the books they're reading. So, that was one that even Andrew talked about, John Gordon, and he's got a lot of really, really good stuff. Peter Scazzaro, I had read those books. And, those are things that we don't do just to throw away questions. Like, we're doing those because we want to learn. We want to help other people learn. And if it's helping them learn.
And people can always grab those in the show notes on the website. Yep. If they can't write them down in the car fast enough, you've got a great resource for them on the website. They can go back and search through those. So.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. For every episode, the show notes, even if you just skim down to the bottom and see what the resources are that were referred to. Obviously, the show notes, we have little, and that's something we don't really say very often, but you brought it up there. So the show note, every show, this episodes, if you're wondering, I want to go back and listen to something, I spend time with each of them to just put the timestamp of when a particular thing was talked about in the episode. So if you just want to refer back to an episode way back, just pull it up on howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. You can search that for that episode and just be able to go to that timestamp and be able to listen to that part of the interview. There's also obviously clips that you can go check out on YouTube if you wanted to do that. But then all the resources and links, anything we talk about in the show, that link is in there in the show notes as well. So you can just click on that. It'll take you right to Amazon. If it's a book, you can go, buy the book. The Andrew's stuff is on his website. He also has a bunch of bonuses. The link for that's on there too. So anything that we talked about today will be there as well. So anyhow, I want to just give a quick preview too. I gave a little preview already. The next episode, 2 weeks from the time this releases, Graham Daniels will be that interview, and I can say personally, it's easily one of my favorite interviews of all time. I won't tell you why. I'll let you listen to that in a couple weeks. But it was a great interview with a great man who's lived a really just amazing life. To hear how God's worked in his life in incredible ways. We have that coming up. There's some other names that we're talking with, other people that we're talking with about getting them on the show as well. No doubt season 9 is going to be another great season with great people that Paul and I get to talk with. Paul, any parting thoughts as we wrap up season 8?
Nope, another great season. And like you said, the next season is ramping up to be another great one. I'm excited about that interview too. And just to be honest, I wasn't sure going into it at all, but coming out of it, I was like, man, I would love that to go longer. And definitely one of the best that I've been part of for sure. So looking forward to that and what the next season has to offer going forward. It's getting better every season. And like we say every time, I mean, we're benefiting greatly from this. I hope that our listeners are. I appreciate you guys reaching out and letting us know how we can do better, or if you have other people you'd love to hear from to connect us with, we'd love to do that as well. But this has been a lot of fun and looking forward to the summer for sure. I know we'll connect more throughout the summer, but hoping everybody has an amazing summer.
Yep. So, folks, as Paul said, definitely reach out to us. You can do so on the website. You can do so, Phil, at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. You can just reach out with any guests you might think would be great to have on the show. If you want to be on the show, we can hop on a call and see if it's a fit. Also, love to hear feedback. Anything that you learned, different things, different questions you might have for us or for the guests, please reach out. And as always, if you want to learn more about coaching the bigger game, which I'm doing with Christian DeVries, the Warrior Way. I mean, Paul talked about the trip to Guatemala, and they do things like that regularly. So if you want to learn more about Warrior Way and all the different camps they have this summer, different things like that, check that out. The link to that will be on the show notes as well. As always, in all these interviews, we don't just do them to kill time. We do these interviews because we know that these are people that are doing incredible things, have things we can learn from, just life lessons that they've had and experienced. And so we do hope and pray that everything that you're learning on this show, you're using it to help you be a better coach, a better parent, a better spouse, better leader, better in everything that you do. And that you continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.